Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed lunch. I hope you enjoyed lunch and are energized for the afternoon. So now we turn to the second session of today's event entitled Urban Regeneration. To help us better understand the second session of today and to introduce our next discussants, I'd like to turn over the floor to our next moderator, Dr. Ronald Hall. So Ronald worked for the European Commission from 1989 until 2018. His responsibilities were principally in the field of policy development in DG Regio. Between 1999 and 2004, he was Deputy Chief Advisor to Michel Barnier, the European Commissioner responsible for regional policy at the time. In November 2004, Ronald was appointed Director in Regio before assuming the role of Senior Advisor to the Director General in October 2012. With responsibility for international cooperation on regional policy, Chair of the Commission's Northern Ireland Task Force and advisor to the annual European Week of Regions and Cities. Following official retirement from the Commission at the end of 2018, Ronald has since been retained by Regio as Senior Expert on International Cooperation. So, Ronnie, please introduce us to the next session and to our speakers.
Hello. Thank you very much, Ivana, for the introduction, and thank you very much to AGORADA and the team for the invitation to be with you this afternoon. It's on a theme which is very close to my heart, I would say, given that I've spent most of my career in the Director General for Regional and Urban Policy. In fact, going back to the period when it was just called the Director General for Regional Policy, the urban was only added just over a decade ago. And it reflects the fact that within the context of EU regional policy...
You hear me on your end? No audio coming through. It looks like there's a mute symbol.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
I think it's the one who's on screen.
Sorry, yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
So when the modern version of EU regional policy began in 1989, and in the period since then, the urban dimension has grown and grown and grown, as you know, to become a very important theme, a very important priority of the European Union. And I think you will hear that from my first speaker. And it's my great pleasure to welcome Anne Wetzel from Hauts-de-France, who, unlike me, knows what it's like to work with the European programs on the ground. I have worked in the Brussels side of the business, but as you all know, the policy works because we have developed over the years an effective mechanism of multi-level governance. So you have the European institutions for strategic vision, for resources, and for designing the multi-level governance system. In fact, sometimes I think that the Director General for Regional and Urban Policy might be better named the Director General for Multi-Level Governance, because effectively that's what people spend most of their time working on, trying to make sure that the different levels, EU institutions, national governments, regional governments, cities, local level, which increasingly has become important as well. These levels are all involved, but how do you make sure that, to use an English expression, they are all singing from the same hymn sheet? That the strategy at the top is being communicated to the bottom, and that in turn the top is hearing from the bottom what works, what doesn't work, and the importance of adaptation to local circumstances. So that's why I think that this is what we spend our time at in DG Regio, trying to make sure that the different elements of the multi-level governance system function smoothly and efficiently. So Anne and myself are representatives of different parts of this multi-level governance system, and there are other levels, as I was saying. Anne comes from Hauts-de-France and is based in Lille, if I understand correctly, so she's not too far away. And we have had a long partnership with Lille, but of course you've changed name to Hauts-de-France from the historic name, Nord-Pas-de-Calais. And there she is the director of the European department, and she works particularly on cooperation programs. She's also worked on some of the mainstream funding programs such as ERDF and Social Fund and the Youth Employment Initiative, rural development as well, with my colleagues from DG Agri, Agriculture and Rural Development in the lead. And last but by no means least, and I am particularly looking forward to anything that you can tell us about the European Urban Initiative, which has come on stream with the new programming period. So Anne, you have the floor. You're very welcome once again. My idea for the session is that you speak for about 10 minutes or thereabouts. After that, the people in the audience, the participants, can ask questions of clarification, not really questions on the policy or on of a more deeply philosophical nature, shall we say. We will reserve that discussion to the end when we've heard all of the presentations. So please take the floor, Anne.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I will then take from you on about the multi-governance and speak about, from the regional point of view, where we stand, speaking about the urban initiative, of course, but also then another point of how then in the region we try also to think and to reflect about urban generation and how we can help our urban actors. So first of all, the adventure of the urban initiative. We started from the scratch. There was nothing, there was a paper, and the idea that it would be interesting to do it between the Commission and a local or regional authority. And then the Commission asked us if we could take it on board. And then we tried to make something. First, it was all about testing, only testing new solutions which could be then transferable and scalable for other cities around Europe. And the idea what really inspired us, because we are an urban region and we know a lot about challenging, that here you have the almost unique opportunity in European funding of trying, testing, and sometimes failing also in trying to find new solutions which then could be done elsewhere. And after then 6 years of the innovative actions, we had 86 projects financed from 19 countries, 5 calls, 14 topics, which came a lot from the urban agenda addressed, and then a lot of concrete examples all over Europe about what then could be really innovation. And from then on, and I take on what you said about the strategic dimension, the Commission, DG Regio, had the idea that it was really important to test, to innovate, but then how can we assure that there is production of knowledge, that they will transfer and capacity building? How can we then work in this field in a more coherent and important way? And this is then where the urban initiative started. We worked with the Commission. We applied for the call, and then we worked with the Commission now for, I would say, 2 years in a permanent way to have this new then coherent way of seeing things where we can still test solutions, but also then focus more on the capacity building and knowledge field. If you, yes, so it is it's still about funding in very interesting ways to enable innovation, always in line with the urban agenda. We can move forward, please. Yeah, the next one, please. So, for example, for the first brand new call for the new initiative, it's about the new European Bauhaus, which closed in January, and we'll have the announcement of the winners in a couple of days at the new Bauhaus Festival. The second call, and it's really interesting, about greening cities, sustainable tourism, and harnessing talents, in line with what was discussed also this morning, really interesting, which opened on the 31st of May and will go on to October, where then all urban actors all around Europe can then apply and propose their way of, in these thematic areas, how they see to bring an innovative urban idea to life and to have it embedded in the ground. Which sometimes it's not only it's not about technical solutions, it's also about the way you work in a city together, how you can then work differently in a new way and find then new solutions together. This is then I would take one of the big pillars of this initiative, but as I said, it's also about capacity building. How then we can ensure that our cities have more possibilities to work together, and the new initiative for the first time gives the possibility of city-to-city exchanges, quick ones, or peer reviews, which are really more structured and longer. You have the different dates and timelines, and then also really like events where urban actors come together, because it was something which came also out of the projects we had. They wanted to meet, to exchange, and to have a really proper base of working together on new solutions. And then also, if we go on, knowledge. How can we assemble, and which is some really a challenge? How can we have all this, the urban practice data bars, the expert data bars, country-specific, can we come together and have a knowledge sharing platform, which will be Portico? We are working on it, and it will be presented at the European Weeks of Regions for the first time in October. So how we then can share and make available all the knowledge, which goes on. We are now testing it and seeing how it will then work. Perhaps the last aspect of this new initiative is, of course, there's a strong link to the urban agenda about, and I come back to what you said about the multi-governance, how you then work also with the member states, the cities, the European Commission, all these are stakeholders together. In the partnerships which existed before, we will have new ones about sustainable tourism and greening cities. We have also new ex-ante assessments for partnerships on food and cities of equality going on that could be launched at the end of 2023. And then how we can support these partnerships and help them to work on it. So just a quick timeline. So this is then how we see in the future this urban initiative and the different, I would say, pillars going on in a really broader and we hope coherent approach. We will see, and I think it will, for us all, very interesting if we succeed in creating this new, I would like, lab, urban lab in Europe together. And I think then it's really interesting that you have the strategic input from the Commission, but then I think in a really modest way, sometimes we have the operational knowledge. And we know what works and how, where we have to be really attentive to the needs or what the cities have to find or what they can't do. And I think in this kind of partnership between the Commission and us, it's quite new, it's quite challenging, but I think it's really interesting to work in this way together. Just some words about the region and its role in our regional area, because we have a lot of cities and important sizes sometimes. Then how we can work and create like networks, help them to have access to knowledge, of a changing information. And I think we developed also some tools to help them with experts, advice for them, and giving them also the possibility to apply them to European programs and not do it by their own, like the FRAP tool we developed. And perhaps a last point about what we also did in our region is a strategic foresight about how we see then the urban areas in the future, facing so many difficulties. How did we work? It's colleagues of the what we call Agence Hauts-de-France, which created this space for discussion, production, and creativity around the challenges, with the idea of we have to produce knowledge, we have to network, to collect, and to disseminate then. And we all do it in-house. The idea is to have really a team of the region, which work then on the future of industry, for example, which then works also of the coastal areas, but a lot also about the city centers in a 2-year approach, which a lot of tools which were developed about expert hearings, analysis, a lot of public participations, especially about youth, young people with world cafes, workshops on stereotypes, factors of change, a lot of ideas about this. And then the idea was, how do we imagine the future with different scenarios and different variables about it? And then, of course, we see, perhaps the next slide, we see the difficulties, but the idea is also to show solutions that the cities will develop and have to develop. And I give you just the example you see on the screen about the health breakdown, how then it affects the city, and working on all the different aspects of it. We had also the work on the climate disruption and highlighting then how we can react and adapt to these impacts our cities. I think I will stop here and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that overview of your activities. And for someone like myself who works now mostly in the International Urban and Regional Cooperation Programme of the EU, this aspect of what is going on in Europe is of extraordinary interest outside the EU. This is why cities outside the EU join the IURC programme, because they regard the European Union and its 27 member states and regions and cities as best practice examples that they can learn from. And of course, the European dimension of that is what we're seeking to promote and project into countries, regions and cities outside the European Union. So the more this work goes on, the bigger our database of experience that the cities can bring to bear on cooperating with cities outside the EU. And these are not just talking shops. These are instances where the private sector shows up, where there are some very interesting and lucrative contracts to be gained, selling EU experience, joint projects where there is equivalence on both sides, which is quite often the case, of course. And as a result, there is an income and employment impact for EU cities from this cooperation. So it is actually very important for our future. So thank you very much. Has anyone got any point of clarification they would like to raise with Anne on any aspect of or anything that she skipped over that you would like to hear a little bit more about, because she was making a heroic effort to keep the time? No? Okay. Well, if that is the case, we will reserve the discussion until the end. In a slight change to the program, we have an issue with our colleague Jonas from the United States. And I'm not too sure if he is available to speak now. Ivana?
Yes, Jonas, can you please speak? Can we try to hear you?
So
Again, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
yeah, it's
Perfect, we
it's
can.
actually much better than I would have expected. So you're probably more clear on the screen than you would be sitting here in the Committee of the Regions building. So Johannes, I'm very pleased. I'm one of these people who always panics about reliance on technology for this kind of event, but on this occasion, our colleagues have done a great job in making sure it works. Jonas, I'll just do a quick introduction of who you are, and then you can deliver your 10-minute discourse. You're currently CEO of Southwest Michigan First and International Economic Development Council. And he leads a talented team focusing on strengthening the regional economy and positioning SMF as a national leader in economic and community development. He's got a wide variety of experience. President and CEO of Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. He helped over 250 companies create more than 26,000 high-wage jobs and deliver $30 billion in economic impact in southern Nevada. He's worked on projects, for example, for famous international names like Barclays or Amazon or Tesla, and Google as well, I could mention. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Jonas, even if it's by Zoom. Maybe the next time we will get to meet you in person. So you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Hey, thank you for having me. I do have a few slides to share, so I'm going to attempt to bring this up here. All right, how's that look? Everybody can see the slides?
Yes, but it's in presentation mode. There, perfect.
That's it. Yep.
Great. Hey, thanks again for having me. It is a pleasure. It is an honor to be part of the conversation about urban regeneration. And it really is my pleasure to join, even if it is virtually, to be part of the discussion. I appreciate the introduction and want to share just a little bit more about my background. And then I'd like to go through an overview of the International Economic Development Council and then talk about policy, urban policy in particular, some of the things we're seeing at the International Economic Development Council. So I currently have the pleasure of chairing IEDC, the International Economic Development Council. So that is one hat I wear. I have a few others. I am the CEO of an organization called Southwest Michigan First. We're a regional, privately funded economic development organization serving part of the state of Michigan in the United States. And for the past 8-9 years, I built and led another group called the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. So this organization, regional, supported most of the state of Nevada in the United States, and quickly became one of the most productive in the U.S. I also lead a group called Consultant Connect, which is one of the largest site selector networks in North America, and a regional chamber of commerce. So a lot of different roles, but I'm here today to join you as chair of the International Economic Development Council. And I'm passionate about this organization. My entire background has been in economic development. So it's an absolute thrill for me this year to be chair of this organization that has helped me professionally over the last really 20 plus years. For those of you that may not be familiar with IEDC, let me share some highlights. So we really we merged a couple of organizations in 2001 and have become the largest nonprofit economic development organization globally. So nearly 5,000 members. A majority of those are in the US, but international growth is important to us. We now have members from 18 different countries and growing pretty quickly. This is a focus area, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that in a little bit. So what does IEDC do? Our mission is really clear. We are here to provide leadership and excellence in economic development for members, for communities, for partners. We're here to serve you. You can see some of the values that are important to us along the way. We are constantly looking to professionalize the field of economic development, provide world-class services and events, policy leadership, research, thought leadership, and expertise that can help our members be successful. It's really all about serving those members, you included as a valued partner. We want to help empower economic developers across the world, really unite globally, but to add more value. It's all about impact. So we can improve quality of life, job creation, have stable tax base along the way, rural, urban, all possible areas. We want economic developers to be more successful. So that sounds great. How do we do that? Many of you may be familiar with some of our offerings, but here's some quick highlights. So we have many conferences, some of these international. In fact, starting on Saturday, we'll be in Calgary, Alberta, for an Economic Future Forum, where and hope you can join us. So this will be a fairly large gathering, but we have conferences throughout the year. We also understand that travel can often be difficult or expensive. So we're having a significant push to online forums, online training offerings, online conference participation. So we have a wide variety of tools and resources that are really about equipping economic developers. Research publications, training manuals, economic development journal, talking through case studies and best practices, and just a knowledge base of practitioners. So those are some highlights. In particular, want to mention the CFD designation, so the Certified Economic Developer designation. This is, by number, by usage, the largest designation of the economic development field globally. We also have a new certificate program around entrepreneurship and a quickly growing program called Accredited Economic Development Organizations. Really recognizes some of the best in terms of organizations that are advancing community and economic development. So if you hear one thing from me today, please hear that international partnerships are incredibly important for us at IEDC. It's in our name, and we intend to be even more intentional going forward about building new partnerships, adding value with organizations like EURADA. In fact, at IEDC, we are currently in the near to the end of a 1.5 year long strategic planning process. It's the deepest dive into strategic planning that we've ever done as an organization. The team at Ernst & Young are been hired at each step along the way, thousands of participants. I hope some of you have been a part of that process. But one of the key findings is opportunity for international unification, advancement, partnership of the economic development profession. So this is a focus area of us for IEDC going forward. And we hope to explore that with you, with other partner organizations. So international work, incredibly important. Let's talk a little bit about policy work. You've got some great experts there with variety of perspectives. For this conversation, I'll share some highlights of what we're seeing mostly in the US. So I think that might add the most value. Got to start with really recovering from COVID. So if we're talking about policy, and in particular in urban areas, we're still, in the United States, you're still seeing massive impacts. So significant business closures, lost jobs, a transition of population from major cities, tier 1 cities, to smaller markets, growing push for remote work. We're seeing a shift from a lot of empty or open or reduced price office space, but that's being shifted to residential space along the way. So there's been these, in the US, there's this perception, and I know it's different in kind of each country. In the US, there's this perception that the federal government has not been that involved or has not had a uniform policy for urban development. And that's fairly accurate. It's mostly left to states, cities, townships, counties. In the past, we've seen policy generally to incentivize company relocations, job creation, new headcount, more tax base in particular, and incentives for office space. That's all changing, and we're really seeing it flipped and turned on its head. So instead of targeting company relocation, really a focus on entrepreneurship and small business. Instead of headcount increases, focus on more stable assets, manufacturing in particular, that makes those companies sticky in our communities. We're seeing, instead of just a focus on new job count, a focus on total job count, including remote workers, and this shift that I mentioned from office, especially in dense urban areas, to residential uses. So those are some of the big shifts. I also got to mention equity and sustainability, disaster recovery. So we're seeing these as significant trends. And in the United States, there is a focus at all levels on equity that has been brought out during the pandemic, but is really, in terms of how we fund programs, how the US, federal, state, and local designs policy, you're really seeing many organizations work together to address social challenges. And that networked approach is incredibly important. I think there's a growing recognition that no one organization can solve any of these big issues. So when you see policy going forward, state level, local level, often it requires networks, ecosystems, agreeing on the front end to work together to advance the work of economic development. The days of just having one organization in the lead seem to be over and favor this much more networked, collaborative response to economic development, especially in our cities. All right, I know time is short, so I'll cut my remarks there off there. But again, I want to say thank you. EURADA is incredibly important partner with us, and I appreciate the chance to be a part of the conversation.
Thank you very much. That all came across loud and clear, Jonas. And I think we're all very impressed with your life as a multitasker in terms of the number of hats you're wearing, as you said. It's almost certainly, I'm sure, a new organization for many people in this room, and that in itself has a considerable added value and might help you in your efforts to develop the organisation. I'm speaking of the IEDC as a worldwide organisation reaching out from the United States, where most of your members are based. It could also be possible that in some way or another you get involved in any future international urban and regional cooperation between the European Union and the US. The current one is coming to an end in 2023, but we remain optimistic that there will be a new one established from 1st of January 2024. And that could also be an opportunity for you to exchange experience, because I know that there are many similarities in your priorities and approaches in relation to what we're trying to achieve inside the EU. I think even that might take many people by surprise, because the idea that there is an urban policy in the United States does not come across very well when you cross the Atlantic, and it's very interesting to hear just how active that is, and creates a good basis for further international cooperation. So thank you very much for that. I hope you can stay on for the final round of questions. At the moment, I'm just going to ask the participants if they would like to pose any questions of clarification. Roberta.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Roberta Dall'Oglio, at the moment Director of EURADA, and let's say not ex, and working in a regional development agency in Emilia-Romagna. I'd like just to underline and to complete the intervention of Jonas, that, and also to go after what you said, Ronald, about the fact that probably in the future we will have also the opportunity to have these exchanges among different regions and cities on the urban management and regional and territorial management, thanks to a prosecution of URC, a follow-up of the URC program. I would like to take the opportunity to ask to Jonas if he can tell something about the event that you are going to organize, the annual conference of IEDC in Dallas, that will be held in autumn, and in the framework of this event, we really would like to have some of our members and of our stakeholders engaged in participating in this big event, and maybe discussing about this particular topic. And I take the opportunity also to invite those regions where we not have members, like Hauts-de-France, to be active in this cooperation with IEDC. I leave the floor to Jonas.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I gotta say, just again, thank you for the partnership. Thanks for the chance to mention our annual conference. So September 17th through the 20th in Dallas, Texas will be the location for IEDC's annual conference. This is our biggest gathering internationally of members. And it is first a lot of fun, but incredible speakers, an amazing lineup of programs, of training sessions, and I want to extend a warm invitation for everybody in the audience. We hope you can join us, and so yeah, thank you again for the opportunity.
Any other technical questions at this stage? No? Okay. So thank you very much, Jonas. That was extremely interesting to bring that experience to our consciousness here in the European Union. And as Roberta says, it could be the beginning of a possibility of closer cooperation on both sides of the Atlantic, which is always a good thing. So I would like to proceed to my third and final speaker. It's always a case of last but by no means least. in this kind of organization. He comes from another one of these cities, like Lille, which is very important to us in the European Commission when it comes to the urban development landscape, and I'm speaking of Malaga. Alberto is an architect by training, and has worked on the historic centre of the Urbanism Office of Malaga, which has undergone very extensive renovation. Yeah. Unfortunately, I have to say I have only seen the pictures. I have not actually been there, but the pictures themselves are very impressive as to what Malaga has done in order to restore the city to a human level, and remove, for example, the dominance of the motor car. Yeah, it's really quite impressive to see, even if you don't get an opportunity to see it at first hand. As an architect, he's been working on European programs, I'm happy to say, for the city of Malaga, and in that context, he's been working on the coordination of different workshops, conferences, and European projects such as EDUSI. Maybe you'll tell us more about this. Alter Ego, local environmental agents towards the sustainable city. And I'm very happy to say he's been involved on the International Urban and Regional Cooperation Programme, in which I am engaged myself. So with that introduction, you have the floor. Approximately 10 minutes, please, and then we take it from there with the questions and answers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ronald, for your presentation, and thank you to EURADA for this opportunity to give us the opportunity to tell what about we are working in Malaga in the International Urban Regional Cooperation. Malaga is participating in this program in these two fields, or two areas, in Latin America with the cities of Cali and Barranquilla in Colombia and Ancilascio in Italy. We are working on urban regeneration of historical neighborhoods bordering the city center and using urban gardens as a tool of integration and participation. And the second area is in Australasia with the city of Christchurch in New Zealand, in the topics related to innovation, ecosystem, and climate adaptation, mainly based on the typology of the urban model and mobility, but also in the ways of approaching the smart city concept and the involvement of citizens in these transformative processes. Next one, please. So for us, the program IUC has a catalytic impact in different ways. The first one is that it makes you to rethink the strategies you have developed and implemented in your city. During the study visits, other cities can relate to your experience, see the results on sites, and therefore they can question your system, provide other solutions, or just give other point of view. So the first conclusion is that it promotes a reflexive analysis of our own strategy. Next, please. The second one is that these programs allows you to learn from the stakeholders and specialists involved in the project's new tools to manage them through technical sessions, thematic webinars, and study visits. Tools like the multi-scale planning, the governance models for citizen participation, the structure of the municipal staff, types of public-private cooperation, etc. Obviously, though adapted to different economic, social, and cultural contexts. Also, it offers a database with technical documents like plans, regulation, and projects that we can use to develop our own council bylaws. So this program strengthens the capacity of local authorities and innovates in the management of different processes. An example of this is the Ancilascio has a long experience regarding the development and management of a network of urban gardens with the local communities. So they have developed an interesting regulation and has created a new role of a coordinator and organizer in the community called the Gardenizer. So this is a very useful base for us to implement our own network of urban gardens. Next, please. The third one is that this program, IUC, is a set of new projects that perhaps you haven't taken account before. The program lets you to think out of the box and develop plans and projects in new topics, using the experience of the other cities. It works like a bank of ideas with an instruction book to implement it. So it stimulates and encourages the city to face new challenges. You can see here in the slide that actually our city is involved in new projects of green infrastructure, like the green corridor of the river Guadalhorce in Malaga. And we are taking advantage of the experience of Barranquilla projects, like the Ciénaga del Mallorquín, Gran Malecón, and Todos al Parque, or projects like the Plan Jarillón in Cali, or the Green Cycling Ring of Rome. This is only an example of what I take in account in our program. Next one, please. The fourth one is that it permits cities cooperate beyond the IUC program. It promotes relationships and long-term projects that can be approached through other European programs with financial aid, which allows the cities to develop a pilot project to be used as a model to implement in other parts of the city. So this program has a multiplier effect on the urban policies. In our case, we extend our cooperation with Barranquilla within the program Ventana Adelante with the project Equality Urban Centers, which incorporates the city of Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. And on the other side, Barranquilla and Ancilacio are participating in a program for community gardens for good governance, active citizenship, and participation called Generactor. The next one. And the last one is that the IUC program enhances participation in international events where a network cities offer new opportunities to find new partners with the same interest. So it opens your city to international relationships. In one of these events, we contact with the project called Bronze Bogotá, which is a cultural district in Bogotá with the Fundación Gilberto Alzate Avedaño that shares objectives with our arts district that we have implemented in the south of the historic city that is called Soho Malaga. So now we are working on an agreement to cooperate next year. In conclusion, despite the different political, economic, social, and cultural contexts, we have the same challenges, the same objectives, and many times the same problems. So IUC program is a great opportunity to work and learn together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alberto. Any technical issues, clarification that you would like from Alberto before we go to the more general discussion? Nope. Okay. Well, the floor is now yours. We have approximately 30 minutes remaining of this session. When you have the opportunity to raise any issues, bearing in mind that we're discussing the theme of EURADA's implication in urban development and in new models of urban governance. So have we any contributions taking on board what you have heard from the perspective of EU internal urban policy, EU external urban policy, and of course the policy perspective coming from a very important organization in the US? Roberta is first off the floor. I could take 3 hands in the air as a first go. Don't be shy. I know this is the first session after lunch, but Where? Oh, sorry, yes. Thank you. Okay, Roberta, please. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Could you say who you are, first of all, and then the question, please?
Yes, my name is Ingrid Meijer, and I work for the Regional Development Agency of the East Netherlands. Also EURADA member. It was a very interesting discussion, and I was wondering, because you each have your own view and your own organization, of course, that you represent. But as when it comes to urban development, could you maybe reflect, or maybe one of you, on the cooperation within the region? Because we're talking also about the use of European instruments, but how is the cooperation within the region? So with cities, with regional development agencies, maybe with regional boards that you might also have. Could one of you reflect on that? Thank you.
I think that is one for Anne, and possibly Roberto, you may have something to add as well. I'll give it the floor to Anne, first of all. Okay.
Okay, I think I would answer in two, about two elements. The first one is if you work in the urban initiative, yes, as an urban actor, then one of the important things is that you have this intern partnership. Because then a city that wants to apply, for example, has a really innovative idea. The idea is then not to have that. Perhaps you have already a city with which you work in other parts of the in Europe, but the idea is then that you create your local partnership. That, for example, you work with a university, which has really interesting input. I don't know, about sustainable tourism. Worked on it, then has a study or something. Then you put on board other actors. Can be from the public side, from the private side, to put on board, and then you create in your urban space this partnership and perhaps a new model also to work on this project in really new ways. And we have so interesting examples of this new type of working together, because otherwise perhaps the city would not have done it. But this, in the project that was experienced and then brought so many people together in a new way of doing things. This is, I would say, the first answer I would give. And then more about the Hauts-de-France region. How do we work? But I would say from the perspective of the European side, what we try to do is then to put, for example, put the local stakeholders, put the cities together, because you know each other, but it's another thing to try to work on subject, for example, urban subjects. How do you do it together? And then it's always interesting to listen to someone as a specialist, the expert, but it's much more efficient if you have a testimony of the city next to you who did something you haven't done, and then you experience how this can really give you new ideas. I think it's always much better to have the impact from a peer. So on, and then I from the regional perspective also, what we try to do is to give then. I spoke briefly about the FRAP, the tool we developed. That because we see it, we have like cities where there's a lot of knowledge, which have the capacity of doing things, of have the people on board, and then there are cities that struggle more to do so, and to help them with days of consultants, for example, to scale up their project, to give them the ideas, sometimes to find them also other partners, which can then really inspiring for this or this aspect, and though to have a really tailored experience and expertise for these cities to then work with others and get more input when needed. Which just some examples about how we do it.
And your strategic foresight would be another example where there would be a sub-regional partnership of actors?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. No, yeah, so, I mean, it's actually fundamental to the process that there is cooperation across the region. City actors, private sector, infrastructure
Research.
providers, universities, research, yeah. I'll come to you, Johannes, in a moment, but Alberto?
In my experience, I work for the public administration. The first step is to access to the programs, is to organize a team to find the new proposals of the new ideas from the different areas of the city council. Because normally the different departments in the public administration work without communication with each other. So normally they have proposal, but they don't share this information, or perhaps they don't have the way to share it. So you have to organize a central coordination team, and not only with the public administration, that with the university. That is very important, because you have a lot of knowledge in the university that is not useful for the city, because after they expose the final works in the career, nobody knows about it. So we try to maintain this bridge between the university and the public administration, so that this kind of projects or proposal they can share with you, and you can develop in the future.
Thank you. Jonas, I'm from your job description at the beginning of your intervention, I imagine that this kind of partnership has been very important to your work over the years, no?
It has. It has, and I've had the privilege of setting up a few different regional development organizations in the United States. And what we've seen really over the last 10 years in the U.S. is the rise of formal regional development organizations. These are nonprofit organizations that represent most major metro areas and surrounding jurisdictions in the U.S. So major city plus surrounding area. The regional development organizations are designated formally by federal government, regional government, local government, educational institutions, and sometimes others, where all those partners will come together. And there's that one coordinating entity, a regional development organization that is empowered to formally, not just through cooperation and influence, but formally as a structure to lead the economic development process with a variety of partners. And when you can get to that level of formalizing the activity, and you have one centralized organization to really pull partners together, lead the charge, create more collaboration, I think that leads to good results. And I've had a chance to, in my most recent job in Las Vegas, we went from, we set up a regional structure formally, went from dead last in job creation in the US to leading the United States in a period of a few years. And so that structure can be really helpful.
Okay. Could I ask you that behind your question, was there a particular issue or problem on cooperation that you had encountered?
Well, no specifically, but thank you all for your answers. It was quite complete also. But we are working also together within our regions, also for not only regional development and European projects, but also urban development. So it's quite interesting also to hear your views on that, on how to cooperate within the region in order to also be of value for the European context. So thank you for that. It was really, it was really valuable. Thank you.
Okay. Roberta, please.
I would like to thank Jonas, because he started to put on the table what I wanted to say, and what was somehow introduced also by the colleagues of Oost Netherlands. That is the following. often regional development agencies do not take into consideration that urban development is a topic in which they should and they can and they are able to work, and also to give a big contribution to urban regeneration and to urban development. On the other hand, sometimes regions, cities, and other actors on the territory forget that they can exploit these big resources that often they have on their territory as a very effective ecosystem coordinators. You were talking about university training, vocational training centers, cities, small, very small villages, other organization, education institutions. This morning we talked about talent harnessing and the big role that can be played by the different actors on the territory. So again, I simply would like to ask you, don't you think that I have my answer, of course, and this is evident, which is, don't you think that the regional development agencies or local development agencies cannot help this process, cannot support this process, either in the implementation of new projects and in the coordination of the different actors or animation of the different actors, also in view of foresight, visioning exercise? Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. If I put your question in the positive, because you expressed it in the negative, do you not think? If you put it in the positive, you mean, can the local agencies make a contribution to sustainable urban development policy and related policy programs? Does that, yeah?
Yes, I didn't want to be negative at all, in the sense that it was underneath the lines, and maybe also the attitude. The answer for me is obviously yes, it is positive. Yeah. It is positive, and that's why we decided to include in AGORADA also this topic, which has been too often, in my opinion, disregarded in the past. Okay. I really believe that urban regeneration and urban development has a lot to do with all the topics that we will deal and we have dealt today. Talent, harnessing, welfare policies, because if you want to attract and retain talent, you have to take into consideration which kind of health infrastructure you offer to workers and social services you offer to workers. And what is this if not also something which has a lot to do with urban regeneration, to be built also together with citizens, take into consideration which are the main challenges that cities are facing. That's sorry, but I like the topic, so I'm really enthusiastic.
It definitely shows your enthusiasm is very infectious. I mean, from the point of view of the European Commission, as you know, we have valued the support of EURADA for more decades than I care to remember, and it's interesting for me to catch up on some of your predecessors in the context of this event. And of course, you are very important to us now in the implementation of international urban and regional cooperation. So we do not underestimate the representative organization of the regional development agencies. Would anyone like to give their impression of the role of regional development agencies in their region?
Just only to say that I agree completely with Roberta, and Malaga is working in this way. It's our politic that we have two conditions. We have good weather, and we have a very big airport we connect with all the world. So, but now we have an attractive city for new workers, and Malaga is working with these digital new workers, as you know, and this is a very important topic in our city.
Good weather and a big airport. Is he talking about Brussels?
Yes. I, of course, completely agree. I mean, I think How can you not? Perhaps then just two examples. First, of the urban initiative, of the urban innovative actions. When we had projects, of course, which really were really interesting, inspiring, where the local agencies were completely involved. And it put so much interest in it, and it helped so much. So, of course, there are examples where you show that this really worked. And another example is the strategic foresight. Here too, the idea how you can work with people, with young people, how you can then do something innovative and work against stereotypes. You work with the local agencies, you involve them, and and what was the case in our strategic foresight, of course.
Jonas, what would be your perspective from a US point of view?
I think the comments have been perfect, so I would just add my enthusiastic yes and agreement.
Yeah. What is the US equivalent of a regional development agency?
Yeah, I think the equivalent is what we would call a regional development organization. Yeah.
RDO. Okay, that's very interesting. So that we move on to a further opportunity for questions. That's 1, 2, anyone? 3. Okay, stop there. You were first, so.
Just a small remark.
Sorry,
I'm Bogdan Chelariu. I'm from Northeast Romania and also the president of EURADA. One remark, it's a bit I want to add some things on what Roberta said, that it's just a stereotype around that there is a bit of a divide between urban and regional. And recently there were some talks in Brussels even about the fact that cities are drivers of change, and then the territory around is a bit opposing change. And you have these cleavages on different aspects. You have the cars, you have the automotive sector, you have transit, you have mobility. Maybe the city wants a cleaner city, a car-free city, and then the region is more like, yeah, you have to allow people to enter. And there was a sort of antagonism in the background, although I think it's a bit our duty to create bridges actually between what is, for sure I think that for the Commission, the region and the urban should belong together, but I think on a daily basis we find a lot of micro conflicts, let's say, and also maybe on some methodologies we were exploring lately. For instance, if we talk about smart specialization, regions had incredible experience there, and in some places where the region had big cities or strong cities, the cities were not maybe fully involved in the process. I would say also that with the regional level, we try sometimes to understand how to involve better citizens, how to get to the unusual suspects, and cities actually for the past 20, 30 years, they experimented a lot with this. But we didn't, somehow there was not a lot of exchange in practices, even though we had the same challenges. But if we see how the methodologies for smart specializations are going, if we ask maybe people in cities if they use the same methods, they have slightly different methods. Maybe it's normal, maybe it's not. It's just a rhetorical question. But I think there's still a gap to fill. That's my point, sorry.
Yes, that is a matter not without complexity that you have just raised, that the city and the city and the region can be the same thing for some policy purposes. And smart specialization might be an example of that. But I agree with you that the cities are the motors of growth. They are the nodal points of growth in the European Union. They're also the nodal points when we actually try to spread economic activity across the territory of the EU. It's the cities that seek to ensure that growth opportunities are spread as widely as possible. And indeed, some of our programs, for example, historically, the program for Poland sought to develop Polish cities as a way of, as we used to say, irrigating the whole territory economically. So it's an important role in what our friends in France call a management du territoire. And last but by no means least, for me, the cities are also a very important territorial target for addressing problems of inequality and poverty, and because that's where those issues tend to be at their most acute in terms of multiple deprivation. And I think that in the end, you cannot be too religious about selecting the region or selecting the city. You select what works when you're talking about a policy context, without saying, oh, this is for cities you're not in, this is for regions you're not in. I think you have to look at what is the situation on the ground before you decide who is in and who is out in the particular program. But that's just me speaking. I'm not representing the Commissioner for Regional and Urban Policy. Who would like to add to this point?
I can say some words because I think it's a really important question. In our region, there are big cities, real, urban areas, and then there are others, which have then other problems and sometimes feel left behind, clearly. And I think when we worked, for example, on our mainstream program, one of the topics coming all the time from a lot of actors was the mobility issue. Because then mobility today is financed via the ERDF to cities, city areas, but not the suburban or rural areas.
Yeah.
And how can you then not connect? And there are a lot of questions, how can you then connect things? And I think for me, it's one important topic. We have to find solutions, because it is really important. Because our cities, as you say, they are a lot of challenges mixed together, and then they have to react, they have to adapt, they have to find solutions. But yes, there are territories and areas left a little bit out of this, and how then they can connect to it. And sometimes you have solutions, but I think for me, especially for the mobility, from what I see, is really an issue.
Alberto?
In Malaga, we have a problem with the mobility because now Malaga is part of a chain of cities along the coast. So I agree with Ronald that we can think about the administrative limits, the borders. We have to change to think about a big city that is a complex of I don't know, about 8 cities along the coast that now works only like one city. So we have to change our way of thinking about the scale. We have to change our scale planning, and now the new strategic plan for Malaga is thinking about it, but now actually at the urban planning and the urban policies of Malaga city. So we have to. I think it's a very great challenge for the next years, because we have to implement our Malaga climate plan. So we have to implement an low emission zone and a lot of things about mobility, and it was really a very big challenge for us.
Jonas, would you like to? Do you have a view on, for example, which is the best object of policy from the point of view of economic development? Is it the region or the city?
Well, so I'll share a couple thoughts.
Okay.
One, so I am pro-regional collaboration, and the point was raised that how you structure regions is incredibly important, like who's in, who's out. If we've seen in the US regions most successful that start with the needs of business and people when identifying boundaries and often having overlapping boundaries. So less about political jurisdiction and which city, county, state is included or not included, but more about identifying regions based on business activity, labor market flows, population trends, interconnections between culture, even if they overlap into multiple cities, multiple jurisdictions, but allowing that to flow based on the needs of business and the needs of people first when setting up those boundaries and maintaining a level of flexibility along the way, but still having a formal structure to push that collaboration across the entire region.
I mean, that is the central issue, that to professionals, the functional area makes the most sense, but then you still need someone to administer it and to take the political leadership, and they exist in constituencies, which may not be the same as the functional area. So the real challenge is optimizing those two realities in some sort of development policy. Time is running out. I'll take the two questions one after the other, and whoever feels best equipped to address it. You go first. The non-EURADA goes first, isn't that the rule? Yes. Or maybe you are EURADA.
Firstly, I do think there's a really important issue about the balance between the urban and the regional. I think, as our colleague from the United States said, and you said, in a functional sense, there's no denying the problems that we're trying to address and the opportunities we're trying to solve can't be done within the confines of an urban area. But as you also said, political structures and representation doesn't work like that. So in the UK, for the last, as long as I can remember, we invent and reinvent regional structures. We have a long tradition of urban-based local government for hundreds of years, but we don't have much of a tradition of regional or sub-regional government, but we keep abolishing it and then reinventing it, which is ridiculous, but it's the contradiction that you just mentioned. And I think as the world's changed with COVID and other things, more and more there's a contradiction that people don't operate within physical boundaries. They never did, but increasingly they don't. They function in a digital world and not within boundaries. And how does governance relate to the functionality of the economy? And I think that's changing even more greatly in the world we live in. But what I was actually going to talk about was, just briefly, was about what we talked about this morning, about demographic change, about social considerations and how they affect development, and also how that affects urban development and urban regeneration. Insofar as, for example, older people. We've got an ageing economy, we discussed that this morning, but a lot of cities actually paradoxically are becoming younger, with students, young professionals, older people leave, middle-aged people move to suburbs, old people leave to retire in the countryside on the coast. That may not be a good idea. I don't think we want, I'm not sure, we probably don't want cities just to be a playground for young people. I don't think, maybe we do. So how do we build in the voices of all communities, including, for example, older people? How do we make sure cities become somewhere which all different age groups and population groups can participate in, and that the process of developing policy doesn't just represent those who are most vocal and those who are most able to participate?
Yeah, just to maybe share some experiences that I witnessed yesterday with regard to the cooperation between the urban and the regional, because I was participating in the study visit of the EU-Japan region-to-region cooperation program. And yesterday, there were two Japanese prefectures who visited the region of Ljubljana. And the Japanese were very interested in the topic of mobility, and we touched upon it a little bit today. Just to say, it was very interesting because Ljubljana is indeed having some mobility issues right now because, just for example, the airport, it's sort of similar to how we have Charleroi as another airport in Brussels, but it's 50 minutes away. So that is how the situation is there. And also within the municipality, within the city of Ljubljana, the only current transportation that they have are buses. But they do offer these free sort of mini buses for the aging population, for the senior citizens. And this is offered for free by the municipality, and citizens they have a number that they can call in case they would like to use these vehicles. So, and these vehicles are energy powered. So just a very interesting example. And also we would like to keep in the loop our online participants. We do have some online questions. So there you go. All right, so first we have a question for Jonas. What is the most important thing the private sector expects from partnerships with the public sector in governments?
Oh, wow. So that's a great question. What is the most important thing the private sector expects from the public sector?
Money.
I think it is a focus on strategies that are that attract people. So we see this increased focus on placemaking and recruiting talent, the talent that companies need to be successful. So if there's one thing at the top of the list across the U.S., it is that government hears from the private sector. It's this push for talent development, upskilling, training, and recruiting talent from other markets. So I would put that at the top of the list.
Next question.
Yes.
These are addressed specifically.
Yeah, exactly. So for Alberto, has IURC given you ideas, partners, or inspiration to apply in EU programs? I believe you mentioned some examples earlier. Maybe you could talk about your next steps. Also, in order to improve your sustainable urban development strategy.
Yes, sure. For example, we are working in develop the urban gardens in super blocks, and we use the experience from Ansilasio and the regulation from Ansilasio that have a very good experience, and in the green infrastructure too from other countries. So for us, it's a very good bank of ideas, as I told in the presentation, and sometimes you have the instruction tool, so manual, so you could implement with a guarantee of sustainable in the time. So absolutely yes.
Thank you for that, Alberto, because it's an important reminder that the cities outside the EU are contributing on a basis of win-win. Yeah. It's not just the EU giving lessons to the rest of the world. We're learning a hell of a lot from, indeed, it's two-way. And increasingly working in clusters, like your Malaga, Cali, Barranquilla Lazio, cluster. Next question, please, Ivana. How many participants do we have online, by the way?
We unfortunately do not see.
Okay.
But yes, I would like to remind our participants online that you can send us your questions through Slido by entering the code AGORADA 2023. And currently, we have no other questions.
Okay. Well, I think at this stage, I should draw this to a conclusion because we're at the end of the time that has been formally allotted. And it's always better to have a program that runs on time, in my view. So it just remains for me to thank EURADA and the Committee of the Regions for my own opportunity to participate in what I found was a very interesting event. I want to thank all of the participants and all of you who've raised points and questions to the participants. But most of all, I want to thank our three speakers who give, I think, an excellent elucidation of some very key issues from the point of view of urban development, and in particular, who should be involved. And if I give the conclusion to Roberta, that would have at the top of the list the regional development agencies. So would you like to express your appreciation of the speakers in the usual way? Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Ronnie, and thank you very much to our panelists. Very valuable insights on the topic and very interesting discussion from all of us. So now, before we proceed to the last panel of the day, we have some coffee available for you right outside the room. Please be back in 30 minutes, and we will continue with some discussions about territorial innovation, interregional value chains, and strategic foresight.